What's the general take on Crew, by the way? Because obviously this squad has now given us every possible permutation except like win the fucking tournament. Like they've had like group stage exits. They've been the upset team. They've been the team that made the playoffs. Obviously the champions, they had an amazing run. Like what do you make of where they're at? Because at the moment, like, again, at the moment you obviously can't discount anyone when you get to the land stage of the tournament, but they haven't had the playoff run in a while now.
Yeah, I mean, Crew are an interesting one because, as we said last time, they're the only team to have qualified for every single event in Valorant. So when you look at them in relation to their region, they're obviously huge. And we have seen instances where they
are they just like the big fish in the pond of that, like a LATAM space?
Well, yeah, I think to an extent, yes. But I think that they can also be a decent sized fish in this pond too, right, because we've seen that before. I just don't know if I believe there's enough depth to them, if that makes sense. And actually, like, this sort of, maybe this is a controversial take, but like this sort of aligns with kind of what some people are saying about DRX right now, which is like, okay, you've had this same roster for some time now and there's always been that wall. At what point do you consider you may need to change it?
Yeah,
even though you're evidently a very good team and you're constantly qualifying for these events and you are having good performances there, but you're not having good enough performances there. And at some point that has to be considered just simply not sufficient. And so that's my wondering with Crew. I mean, I think that, Kesnet has always been a great player for them. And actually, back last year, I always really enjoyed watching Delzik as well, even though he's maybe a little bit less like flashy. But again, like this was back in a meta where we saw a ton of like Reyna play and stuff like that. So it's a different meta, a different time. I didn't anticipate Crew getting out of their group. Their win against Loud really surprised me. And they also had like a decent push against Guild as well. There were 2 overtime games, and then the one of the maps that Crew lost was quite a loss. It was a 13-6. And so it's sort of like, all right, maybe they're on that cusp, but it's like, how long do you push at the cusp before you realize that your forward motion is not keeping up with everyone else's? I don't know. Like, I find these things so hard to judge because there's like the commitment argument and we have this synergy and we kind of know what how we all work and that we have great players, and especially if you're in a smaller region and your talent pool is maybe a little bit smaller, it's just sort of like, is that the right decision to then break that up when you have been consistent in your qualification for so long? But yeah, it's kind of like you say, they've sort of had every different experience of LAN performance where like they've gone all the way, but they've also gone out in groups.
Yeah, the thing for me is, like, I'll be very interested to see in Valorant because it looks like the circuit's going to affect us as well. Actually, what is like the lifespan of a team if essentially the move doesn't work, or as you say, you just don't progress beyond a certain level? Because I have to say, in CSGO, the problem we had in our game was, especially a few years ago, we had probably one of the most healthy LAN scenes in the world. So like every 2 weeks, there really would be a tournament. So I always used to say, in the world where you'd have every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks you have a LAN, I used to say it actually only takes like say 2 or 3 months before you know if the team's going to be good or not. Like if it goes 2 or 3 months and plays, let's say, like 6 or 7 LANs, if you're not actually good at the end of that, you're never going to get good. Like that team has just not worked. Like, because at the end of the day, 3 months is a lot of scrims. You've played official games. You've seen all of the permutations. Like at that point, something has to click. Like that's the problem I think with esports is this. It is true that you wanted all these concepts are great. Like the idea of like you build a team and you like, you improve things, but you can't polish a turd, as the old saying goes in England. Like there has to be some initial synergy. Like the initial composition of players has to be good on some level. You have to on some level have like chemistry that hopefully some of it's natural. Like a couple of players play well together. I think you can improve, but I think the problem for me is that's what you're sort of getting to. Is like, is it a fundamental impasse? If it is, then it doesn't matter if you're like just that close. You might just be that close every time. But the problem obviously is, if it ends up being like maybe in their region, for example, maybe their team plays part of why their team's even good. And if you put in a better player on paper, maybe it makes that worse. That can happen too. That's true.
Yeah, I mean that's just the hard thing. Like, is this the best permutation of players that we have in this region? And I mean, I'm always kind of like open to the fact that no, I think if you look hard enough, if you're not coming first in these tournaments, if you look hard enough, then yeah, it is possible to find a better group of people, or even if it's just switching out one comp.
I mean, they're even doing,
something like
to
that.
be fair, they even have that weird angle where, because they can recruit anyone who speaks Spanish in theory, like they could actually, they must have loads of people they could potentially source from.
Yes, that's true. And also, like, going back to another one of the points that you just made about when the regions kind of come together next year, it could be that simply being in an environment where they are then regularly playing not just the best Latin American teams, but also the best North American teams as well, because, you know, those two regions are going to be coming together to be one mega region.
I hadn't thought of that angle, yeah.
Yeah, that could end up being like a really big part of it. If simply your day-to-day scrim partners and opponents and whatever are of an average higher level, then that could just end up being what you need. Like, you know, environments.
That sounds like for those little regions, it'll be very interesting if they get thrown in with the NA group. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's going to be like the Americas region.
Right.
So it's not going to be NA and LATAM as two separate regions. It's going to be one like big region. But then the question that you have there is, do they remain to be I was going to say fully Chilean team, but they have one Argentinian player and an Argentinian coach. But do they remain to be a fully South American team if they are now playing on North American soil and they also have the option to maybe pick? Because I'm going to assume, I don't know if this has been said anywhere, I'm going to assume, let's say they implement a 3 out of 5 rule for the regions, sense, like like they do basically anywhere. Does that then mean that 3 out of the 5 have to be from any of the Americas?
I would assume they'll do that.
It must be, because surely if you say crew, you have to have 3 out of 5 Latin American players, but Optic, you have to have 3 out of 5 North American players. That is an unfair, balance, especially if you're playing in the same league. So it must be, right? So I don't know. Like, do they do that and they say, okay, well, we're gonna fill 3 slots with North American players then, and we'll just keep 2 of our Latin American players? I don't know. I suspect that there will be some politics getting involved in that part of it. But in an ideal world, assuming that they do keep their full roster now, that could end up being like what they need. Now, that might mean that it's less likely that they qualify for international events for some time if they're sort of put into this new pool where the competition's harder, and therefore it's harder for them to get to the top of it. That may be what it is, but it could be that it sort of throws, you know, those videos where people throw babies into pools and they eventually swim.
Oh,
it could
when
be
they're
like,
born or whatever. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It could be like that. So, like, give them a year and then they're actually...
Here's the thing, though. You've gotten the premise mixed up, though. It's when they're born in a pool, then they just can swim immediately.
You don't know what videos I'm talking about. There are literally
There's actually a version where you throw it into
on the side of a pool. People stand on the side of a pool and they throw babies in. It's to teach them how to swim.
I mean, listen, in theory, that might work as well. I know what you mean, actually. I think I do know what you mean, actually. I thought for a second you'd just taken the premise and, like, you didn't realise they were being born in the pool. I know what you mean.
No,
it is a separate
lob these you mean
like
in pools.
You mean like a TikTok phenomenon or something, right? Where it's like something they do to just show that it can sort of like swim immediately or some shit, right?
I like how you say that as if it's like, this is an experiment we're doing to prove the baby.
No, it's not. No, it is. Isn't it like a trend that people are copying it? They're like, oh, look, I did it with mine and it works as well.
They do them for like water safety courses, I think, so that like little kids and babies are used to. They just learn how to
in theory they can do it naturally. Yeah, exactly.
It's not like a social experiment for TikTok.
No, but I just meant that, like, people, and then it took off as a trend, like, people copying other people.
Yes.
Like, I'm pretty sure that's what they were doing. Like, the same way if the dog does something cool, they try and get their dog to do it or whatever, right?
Right, yeah.
By the way, what you were saying at the end there, though, you're right. The downside, obviously, if you combine all these regions, is if these end up being on the bottom of the hierarchy. If you don't qualify, and there's only 3-4 spots or whatever, and you don't get it. That sucks. But here's the upside, though. You could actually have what basically happens in CS:GO happen now, which is because everyone's going to know all the NA teams, even down to like the 7th or 8th team. Like, let's be real, in NA, as we talked on last episodes, there's a million orgs trying to get in. Like, there's big orgs that don't even get into the VCT part of the challenges, etc.
Haven't they just gone through I think they've just gone through the next round of franchise.
They've started doing something like that, yeah. So basically, when they have this set up, the good news is this. If you're a not well-known team from Brazil, Latin America, the point is you will actually have a platform to show that you're good, though. Because if you come and you qualify for this, or you play like one of these teams and you beat them, people are going to know by virtue of the opponent who you are, and you sort of get a bit of shine. That's how you can get known. Because the problem we're going to always have is we're not hooked into like the Brazilian scene. We don't know who the up-and-coming player is or what the next... So, you know, you only tend to find that out once they get to the LAN. You know, it's like it's still late at that point.
Actually make me wonder now you say that, like, because I don't like the tier 2 scene. Presumably those will be separate, like North America and
that's a bit weird,
all
isn't
of the
it?
Latin American ones. Because I highly doubt there are going to be, unless they have an actual academy system. I highly doubt there are going to be orgs that are willing to pay to move tier 2 players into North America if they don't need to. So I do wonder about that, because then, like, if your development system is imbalanced, that also maybe like implies there's going to be more of a bias towards picking up North American talent. Like, I don't know, because I still think that the information that they've actually given about it is fairly bare bones for now. So I'm sure at some point, like, we'll find out about this stuff. Because then, I was going to say, maybe they'll have it combined but do it online. But actually, I don't think that would be logistically very ping-wise. I don't think that'd be super possible. So I don't know. But my hope is that these teams with Latin American and Brazilian players aren't going to find themselves sort of picked apart when the regions combine. And I hope that what it will be is just a really big beneficial position for those teams to just have better competition to improve. Because these teams at the top of the tree in those regions, like Loud, like Crew, we know about them. They have like global fans now. No one is going to be talking about these teams as if they're shit. They're not going to be looking at them and being like, you know, that's like a small region. Don't really think that's. I think they've proven that they can be a region or regions to be taken seriously. But I would love to see that sort of extend below just the very top layer. And then, I guess that just depends on how it is that a lot of the new format is going to be approached.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.